Hello and welcome to the Property Lifestyle Mastery podcast. I am Jackie Tomes from Property Strategy, and on this show we are having open conversations about building property businesses that create not just cash flow but also freedom from those who have been there and done it. So myself and Dave have gone from startup to over £16 million of deals done in under 10 years, and we're sharing on this show not just the highs, because you always hear about the highs, right? But it's also about the lows and the lessons along the way. So we've been really focused on freedom, creating what we have become known for, the holiday every 6 weeks lifestyle. And we're covering everything, right from the big picture strategy, maximising potential, right down to practical solutions. And my guest today, Susannah Cole, needs very little introduction. She is a powerhouse force in the property industry and the founder of the Good Property Company. They've sourced over 200 properties, all in Bristol, with a value of over 45 million. So she is an incredible lady, and when you hear this episode, if you haven't heard her speak before, you will really see why she's managed to do that. But today we're not talking too much about the property business itself. We are talking about health, because what you might not know about Susannah Cole is that she's been through some very big health challenges over the last couple of years and has been faced with a 40% chance of death, which she has had to deal with. And so I'm so grateful about Susannah's openness and honesty on this, because it's a very rare thing to be able to hear someone who's been through something like this talk so openly and candidly, and someone who is in the position that she is within the industry. So without further ado, here is myself and Susannah Cole on prioritising your health whilst you're building your property business. Hello, Susannah.
Oh, an absolute pleasure, And we are on the other side of the world to each other right now.
Oh, the modern world. So me in the Philippines and you're in Bristol right now?
I'm currently in Bristol, yes.
Well, it's amazing to be here with you today. We've been going back and forwards discussing how we're going to angle the topic today. And I was just really blown away when you shared what you wanted to, maybe cover today. And obviously we have our different areas that we focus in on for this podcast. And for today, we're going to be focusing on peak productivity, but particularly around some of the health habits that are really important to you. Now, obviously, I've watched you and admired you from afar for many years. Like, I think you're obviously really accomplished both as a property investor, but also as a mentor as well. And I think what you're going to be sharing today and what you've been through is just going to be such amazing for other people to hear, and really help, I'm sure, people who are going through their own challenges. So yeah, thank you in advance for what we're going to be talking about today.
It's going to be lovely. And thank you. And I really like your structure. I was really impressed with it, where for anyone that doesn't know, there are a number of different values that you want to really cover off. And I just loved the whole diagram. It made it so easy to think that's really important and that part's really important, which is why it made it so easy for us to talk about this today. Yeah, and hopefully this might help some people and keep people healthy and maybe save some lives. That would be good, wouldn't it?
That sounds great. This is so much more than just property today. So tell me why, when I showed you our kind of blueprint with these different areas, why was it that the kind of health habits and energy management was what jumped out to you?
Okay, so one of my neighbours said to me a while ago, Susannah, you're a little bit too young to join the organ recital. So I'll jump over most of that. But Jackie, I got diagnosed with cancer on the 19th of January, 2021. And since then, I've had 1 cancer, 2 cancers, 3 cancers. And then you don't know, but 4 weeks ago, they said that spot in your lung, it's moving, 4 cancers. So that's why I'm coughing. Oh, you should see Jackie's face right now. It's quite cute. That's why I may have a little cough, because I've had lung surgery 2 weeks ago yesterday, but I didn't want to miss this podcast. So that's quite a shock. And then on top of that, I've had 2 preventative operations which removed precancerous cells for 2 others. So you could say I've been kicking up to 6, but back down to 4 and got rid of 2. Actually, all of them are got rid of, by the way. So don't worry, folks, if you're sitting going, blimey, she's a goner. She ain't. It's all past.
Wow. And that must have just been such a shock. Take us back to, did you say 2021 was the first?
2021, yeah. So right smack in the middle of COVID.
Brilliant timing, just what we needed.
Well, there were lots of pluses to this timing with hindsight. But yeah, I went into the appointment with my daughter. It actually was a misdiagnosis, and that's actually fairly common. So it's one of the lessons maybe to talk about today. But I went into the appointment with my daughter. My daughter was really sweet. She'd already talked to a friend of hers who was a nurse, and they said they only bring you in personally if they're going to tell you it's cancer. And she sweetly hadn't told me. So what was adorable was in some ways she was kind of protecting her mum from worry, but also she was prepared. And he basically said, yeah, you've got this cancer. We pretty much think it's treatable. And I just, there are 3 ways to approach it. You either fight, flight, or freeze. And those are all valid methods. And I remember I just leant so far towards the consultant and went, if you're okay with me swearing, this better not bloody kill me. I mean, my body was like so leaning towards him. I couldn't get closer. I was just like, this better not kill me. But it was a shock. And then there were lots and lots of shocks, as you probably realise from my little litany of lists there. But some of the shocks were the delays. And as an entrepreneur, you want to figure out a problem, identify the components of that problem, and figure out a solution. And I was pretty taken aback, and that's a very polite way of saying it. From that initial diagnosis, it was 3.5 weeks before they figured out what kind of, what stage it was. So that's emotional torture. I mean this with no fault pointing. For 3.5 weeks, you're just going, I'm numb. I might be living, might be dying. What's happening? So all of that stuff was quite a shock, because I'm used to kind of making decisions. And here I was suddenly not making decisions.
Completely paralyzed in like the midst of this like completely life-changing thing. Like what's the context about, just like from a property perspective? What's going on in the business at this point? Like what's around?
Well, this was why, in some ways, if we had to have this, and by the way, folks, 1 in 2 people will have this. So either it will be you, and I don't mean to wish it on you, or be someone you love. So maybe listen to this podcast to gather information, because I'm a details girl, so I can help you guys, so you can help someone you love. Because obviously we don't hope it's you, but we also hope it's not someone you love. But it will be. 1 in 2 people will get cancer. And at the moment, 1 in 2 of those people will die. So 1 in 4 people will die of cancer at the moment. We don't want that, and we can prevent that. And in fact, there have already been property people who have been saved because they followed my little spreadsheet. I'm not saying I'm a savior. I'm saying I learned some stuff and they implemented it. And so the timing was actually kind of good, considering who wants this nonsense going on in their life. I had mentored for a decade. I adored it. I just love seeing people succeed. But I had decided, almost like you, right, I'm going to take a sabbatical. Although you've got like a life of traveling, I was like, I'm going to hire myself a villa in Bali for 6 months. So with a mentoring program that's live, you have to give like a year's notice. You have to be really thoughtful to the people. So we actually only had 2 more weekends to go on mentoring, because I'd given notice 11 months earlier. Property, I had already said to myself, look, I need to be away in Bali for 6 months in this beautiful villa that I'm going to hire. So we need to automate. So I'd already automated a huge amount of property. I used to manage everything in-house. Deal sourcing, we were no longer running as a deal sourcing business, because I've become a bit of a multimillionaire by that point. So I didn't need to do the deal packaging anymore. The properties were all built. So I wasn't actually buying any new property, although I had bought myself a flat in Barcelona, which was being renovated. And then team-wise, I'd actually decided to move totally different models. I used to employ up to 16 people, full and part-time, and I decided to move almost everything I could to automation and then outsource the rest. So I was incredibly lucky in an unlucky moment to not have huge weight of responsibility on my shoulders. We just were at the end of that whole transition.
Oh, that is, I don't know how philosophical you are about all of that, but that just to me feels like this is what you were meant to be fully, I don't know, focused on and learning from something completely new and what you wouldn't have chosen.
Yeah, because I didn't then have the responsibility of people. I didn't have the responsibility of property, because all of my properties were outsourced. I didn't have, sorry, they were almost outsourced. A really dear friend of mine, Arthur, who actually came to me as an 18-year-old, and over a decade later, even though we're different generations, we're really close friends. He was still managing some of the properties, so he was, he did finalize it in the first year of me being under treatment. But the thing that makes me giggle was I had decided I was going to basically have a spa for 6 months, and instead of that beautiful spa happening in Bali, it happened in my house in Bristol.
You weren't meant to go to Bali then. Have you subsequently been to Bali, or is that still on hold?
I went before, and then a really dear friend of mine, Sonny, lives in Australia, and he's like, Suze, come out to Australia with me. So I'll need to go to Bali again when I go and see him, hopefully next year. But Sonny, although he lives in Australia, used to come with me into the MRIs mentally, because Sonny's a weightlifter and he's got a great business now, and he went to the Olympics, and I went and supported him. And Sonny's one of my friends that's got impenetrable strength. And his favorite song is Stevie Wonder's Superstition. So I used to channel Sonny every time I had to go into an MRI for a scan, which obviously is a frightening moment, and ask them to put Superstition on. So Stevie Wonder, Sonny and I hit up every MRI together.
It's amazing. Wow. Okay, so take us back to January. You've just got this news. You're in your kind of like 3 weeks of purgatory. How did you deal with that?
I think entrepreneurship is useful to give you some tools to deal with crises. Do you recognize that?
Yes, for sure.
And I think it was quite useful. So the first thing I did, I don't like supermarkets very much. I tend to buy small, local, organic. The very first thing I dealt with it with trying to take action, and of course the situation was, we don't know at this stage whether this is terminal or not, and we won't know for 3.5 weeks. What? No, that's bizarre. That's and that's a normal situation for most cancer patients. That's terrifying to think that, these people going through this. So the first thing I did was, on the way back, my daughter and I, the hospital that I initially went to is only 10 minutes away. We put together a WhatsApp team, and I called it Team Susannah. And we put in there all the people I love and all the people who love me. And we're like, okay, here's some bad news. So we hadn't even got home, and we're like, right, let's assemble the team. And it was love, friends and family. And then the second thing I did was I went to Waitrose, and I bought £250 worth of organic fruit and vegetables. I was like, I'm going to kick this thing. and then I started researching. And I started researching very, very strongly. So I ended up reading about over 1,000 medical papers. And the website I used to go to was PubMed or the National Institute of Health, those two websites, because I wanted to get close to the data from scientists. My dad's a professor, so I'm quite used to being in an academic surrounding. I've done a master's myself. So PubMed and National Institute of Health. And then I started reading books, and I read about 220 books. And the 3 top books for anyone else going through this, maybe you guys will find this helpful. The very first one had the biggest impression on me. It was called Kelly Turner, Radical Remission. And she talks about, so I'm not a woo-woo person, but I'm happy to look at everything. And she is now studying with Harvard. They've got a joint study, and she had a lot of cancer in her family. She's from America, and she's a doctor. And she said, why is it that occasionally people who are diagnosed as terminal survive? Really good question. And why are we not studying them? Really good question. So whilst I'm not saying, oh, you can cure your cancer, I'm absolutely clear there are things you can do to support you jumping over that line. And that allowed me to understand that people who are technically diagnosed as terminal occasionally survived. And she pulled together 75 things that were common and 9 key things that were absolute on every single person she studied who survived. And they're still studying that now at Harvard. So that was an amazing book. Kelly Turner, Radical Remissions. Second one I went to, she's quite well known in the UK, Jane McClelland, How to Starve Cancer, which is more about using off-market or off-market pills. So for example, I still take aspirin daily, low-dose aspirin, because it cuts the reoccurrence of colon cancer very significantly, but that cost me 75 pence, so no one's making any money on it. So I'm not going to go and say I don't believe in conspiracy. I believe in cock up. And if you're just selling aspirin for 75 pence, you can't do a £1 billion study. So
True.
So it's not going to be in the NICE guidelines, but it's been known for decades. And then the third one, although I read over 200 books, was Professor Robert Thomas. he has won so many awards as both a clinician, but also an author within the cancer sphere. And he's written a lot of books, but the one I might recommend for everybody, because it's not about cancer, is How to Live. And that's all about health. Really useful books. And I hung on to these like life rafts, I have to say. And I looked at trying to implement every single thing that I learned from them fast.
And so what would you say maybe were like the top 3 things that you changed, and maybe were the ones that were more surprising to you? What sort of things were they?
Well, the top 3 might be semi-obvious, but then I'll talk about the surprising bits. So the first one was non-negotiable. I need to move every day, because exercise is really... So basically, the way I viewed it was, you lot, wonderful doctors, and I encountered wonderful doctors and I encountered deeply incompetent doctors. And this is not a moan fest, and I don't want to go into that. But I just want people to know that, again, if we go back to being an entrepreneur, you probably occasionally have had to let somebody go from your team because their performance is poor. And so I've had that, I've employed people for many decades now. But I went into this experience expecting my doctors to be supersonic, superhuman beings. And with that range of cancers and near misses, I experienced a range of competencies, from deeply incompetent, killing, to enormously competent. So I ended up, so I want people to be aware of that. Try not to let it be the story, and do something about it. So the first thing was, I have to move every day. I have to do my steps every day. And the second thing was, I am going to eat so many fruit and vegetables. It's unbelievable. Oh my God. I got a really
good... organic fruit and veg, or just any fruit and veg?
For me, organic, but I always was organic. I mean, I was really healthy, barely drink, don't smoke, loads of exercise, sports, weightlifting, CrossFit, all that stuff. I brought my kids up on organic food. So it was Murphy's blinking law that this kiddo got something. So yeah, the second one was about food. And I've got a very dear friend, Emma, who comes for supper with her husband. And she's a sportswoman. And she comes in like an aeroplane, like a crop spraying aeroplane. And I just love it, because she just comes in and she's like, oh, yes. And before we even get to supper, she's like eating 4 items. And her husband's going, Emma, I think it's brilliant. So my place was ready for Emma all the time, And then the third one was about human connection, love. So although they're basic, they're actually 3 of Kelly Turner's Radical Remission's 9 top rules. Then there are things like meaning, spirituality, and some sort or other reason to live. All of that, but those were my top 3 that were just utterly non-negotiable. So I could kind of combine them, because I could go for walks with friends. So all my walks were then planned out with friends. I stopped work immediately, by the way, and I've only started work. Well, I started work 6 weeks ago. Then 5 weeks ago, got that silly news about the loan, and we're not working today. We're having fun. But I'm technically slowly going to start work again. So I stopped work for 2.5 years. I was like, I'm focusing on my immune system. But the love thing, it wasn't that it surprised me, but it was, I was a single parent bringing up 2 kids and running a business. And then I did an MBA to try and be able to earn more for my family. And then I started a business. So my focus was very much kind of my family, and then obviously the income and the business for my family. And I've always had good friends. My oldest friend, we're friends since I was 12. But I probably, if I'm honest, didn't focus on my friendships and relationships as much as I needed to. That's definitely true. Definitely true. And here suddenly was this cancer glasses non-negotiable love. So it worked both ways. I knew who was in my circle, and with complete kindness, like taking a little bird and saying, darling, you need to come out of the nest. There were 2 or 3 people, with kindness that needed to come out of my circle. And it was just so clear, because there was no time to mess around. Potentially I could die here. We're not messing. Yeah. And nobody needs to be mean, which, so there was this real focus on love and relationships that was a rejoicing. And that's my biggest learn, actually. So it's simple, it's basic, it's not mind-blowing, but friendship and love. My mum, who's 79, she's been down for 10 days to look after me after the surgery. It's so cute. We just like gentle times together, and then get a little cup of tea, watch TV at night time and figure out what we're going to watch in the day and read the paper and do the garden. And that's our day. And then we do it tomorrow. Just love. So that really rose in significance in my life.
Have you come across Louise Hay on your journey? Yes. What I mean, for her work blows my mind. For those of you listening who haven't heard of her, Louise Hay's concept that all of our physical ailments are basically created in the mind first and foremost. So now anytime that I get sick now, she's got this little handbook where you can consult what your different ailments are and maybe what the root cause of it more emotionally might be. Have you seen any synergies from your life in that regard?
Yes. I won't go into any detail, but I've got one family member who I've been deeply worried about for a long time, and I'm sure that contributed because, again, remember, I'm a geek, so I was reading studies about prostate cancer, and if a man, because obviously it's for blokes, if a man is depressed, he's 33% more likely to reoccur. So you can take the stuff from kind of out there left field, like Louise Hay territory, and then you can bring it into, okay, if somebody's unhappy or sad about something, it actually lowers their immune system. And then scientifically, that means that their immune system is not ready to deal with the 3,000 cancer cells that are in a person's body at any one time. So I've really realized that I know she's Western, but East meets West really matches. Yes. 100%. So I do think that was part of it. And then the other part was very much Western. I got genome tested and I have a faulty gene, which has the same life expectancy as long as I get tested and as long as we nip things in the bus. What's the word? Nip things in the bud.
The bud.
Yeah.
In the bud.
So I kind of believe in both. So I did acupuncture. I did hypnotherapy. Totally don't believe in hypnotherapy, but I was like, I'm quite frightened. And so the way I viewed it was, the doctors, it's their job to do the science. I walked into that chemotherapy room. I mean, it was bravado. And I went, right, I want rainbows and chocolates, please, people. And I always went in with good hair. I always was mindful of my posture, shoulders back and down, big chest, bring the breath down into the stomach, be grounded. I mean, guys, you are terrified. You are thinking, is this going to kill me? Well, no. I always kept that thought beyond my need to think about it, but it was always there. But at the same time, I thought your job is to do all the medical stuff. My job is to try and improve my immune system in every single way that has ever been proven. So I need to get rid of fear. Great, I'm going to a hypnotherapist. Don't even believe in it. Amazing guy called Michael Hughes in Bristol. I love him as a human being. And we did it over Zoom because it was COVID. How mad is that? And I also went and did acupuncture. I'd been doing acupuncture for years for sports injuries, but I went and did acupuncture with an absolutely superb guy that specializes in cancer acupuncture. And he was kind of like my guide. And he did say, Susannah, cancer is like a map. There's going to be peaks and troughs. And just that allowed me to go, okay, this isn't going to be linear. And it certainly wasn't.
It just sounds like your life became the cancer project, and the same fervor that you've grown your business and been so successful is the same way that you approached, I don't want to say beating cancer because it almost sounds quite negative. It was just project overcome cancer, like just deal with this next thing, basically.
Yeah, it totally did. And that's where property, we'll talk less about property in this one, but that's where property was so generous to me, because the first department was deeply flawed and deeply incompetent. It was a misdiagnosis, blah, blah, blah. I won't go into details. And I probably would have died of cancer if I'd stayed with that department. I mean that kindly. But they did me a real favor. I asked the nurse very early on, what happens if this is stage 4? And she said, we stop treating you, which is quite shocking, but actually very useful to know. Because I was like, no.
You're going to give up at that point. That's the plan.
Yeah, and so remember, I'd already prepared to go and do this 6-month sabbatical in Bali, so a lot of my life was really quite organized for that. So what we did was we sold 6 houses to have a massive fighting fund just in case, because I was very aware that areas and different countries do different things with cancer. So sorry, I'm not staying within your system. Remember the rebellious entrepreneurs kicking out here. But I was also very confused because because I don't know anything about this. I'm an absolute beginner. What's going on? So I had a big fighting fund in the bank, which was very useful. And of course, I still was making six figures with property without having to do any work at all. So that was incredibly useful as well. So I did have money and I did have time, and that was entirely down to property. And so I switched teams. It took a little while. There's all, again, as an entrepreneur, and you probably recognize this, when the problem emerges, it's never clear with a big arrow saying, this is the problem. It's fuzzy and difficult and unknown and confusing, and your gut's telling you something, but you're not quite sure. And especially with medical stuff. But after 6 months, I switched teams and I moved to the Royal Marsden. But of course, I had numerous teams in Bristol, but that particular department just wasn't very competent. And I paid privately, and I've spent 150 grand on my treatment, which property gave me the gift. But without it, I wouldn't be here. And I went to the Royal Marsden. And so again, if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to say, well, I need A-listers on my team in a business. And the Royal Marsden is the best cancer hospital in the UK. And they are stunningly good. There's an amazing program called Super Surgeons. I just watched it last week with my mum. I couldn't watch it before. And it's about the surgeons in the Royal Marsden doing kind of pushing the edges in surgery for cancer. And their attitude is exactly the attitude of my specialists. So things like I got genome tested, and they found, oh, you've got a faulty gene. So we need to just scan you more regularly, which is why, of course, I had this little lung surgery 2 weeks ago. So, so get the right team in place.
And so you're coming back to us all now with this gift of this experience that you've been through, 40% chance of death staring you in the face. Yes. Like, did your perspective on life, has it just completely shifted? Like, because I know sometimes people go, that happens and it kind of makes you question this whole, what you've done in life. Like, was there any regret, or was it just gratitude for where you were?
There wasn't regret, but there was wondering. So mainly it was quite positive. And also I've got quite strong, so the wondering was, what did I do to cause this? Which I think is a normal wondering. And certainly I'm sure that some of the stresses of running a business didn't help my immune system. I know being worried about one particular family member is probably woven in there because you're worried about somebody. So, your immune system's lower. Definitely. And then the other part that, because I'm a person that likes to take action, it's like, well, we in Britain were very reactive to health. And actually, I just shifted from reactive to proactive. So I know at one point my family, they're just wonderful, but they were just like, okay, so I have a whole list. I personally think we, all of us, and this is hopefully useful to other people, should be very proactive about our health. So I think proactive screening is the way forward. And I have a little spreadsheet. And so Matt Siddell, he got proactively screened after we were talking, and his doctor said in 2 years' time, mate, that would have been cancer. His two brothers have just had it. Both of them in X number of years' time, that would have been cancer. They cut it out. So I'm a real fan of using science to proactively screen, to eliminate problems before they get big. And then the other part that definitely came up was that a knowledge about the sympathetic and parasympathetic state. So being an entrepreneur, I'm pretty sure I stayed far too long in the, it sounds a lovely state, doesn't it? The sympathetic state, but that is fight or flight. That is, let's go, 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 go. And actually the thing I had to learn was the parasympathetic state. So the acupuncture with Henry McGrath, who's amazing in Bristol. I did nutrition, I did yoga, I did meditation. It's about switching on the parasympathetic state to allow my immune system to grow. So, the health, the food, the friendships, the walking. So I had to tick the box of, has my tummy gurgled today? If so, for a long period of time, like if I'm lying on that sofa and there's a 10-minute gurgle, tick, we're in the parasympathetic state. So what we're doing is we're switching on my white killer T cells, get them out there, to chomp up any cancer cells. So
basically like relearning a whole new way of being for you. Yeah. And I think this is like the business, it's the reason we are successful, because we know how to go and make stuff happen. but then it's also our undoing at the same time. It's a gift and a curse. So you've had to learn a whole new way of being. And I guess because you had no choice, right? Like it was either you figure out how to chill out or you will die, probably. You had no choice. But I see this a lot, you know, we mentor people and we just see, you see people on the road, like they're so stressed out, they're so wired, they can never turn off, they're working 7 days a week, they can't take a holiday. You're like, you are headed for serious health issues if you don't listen to your body. So what would you say to those people?
Make it a non-negotiable, and make it a hard stop. It needs to be non-negotiable. So sometimes you need to relearn things. So in the early days of being an entrepreneur, of course you're getting scrappy, of course you're climbing the ladder, of course you're bootstrapping, you know, but those skills don't serve you later on, either as an entrepreneur or as a human being, maybe with something tickling away in your body. So I would definitely say, number one, screen for everything. You know, a whole bunch of blood tests, your poo test, it's called the FIT test, the mammograms for ladies, PSA for men, the AAA, and then personally, MRIs. I would pay for a whole body MRI once every 3 years, even if you're healthy. And then you can write me an email and go, Suze, I wasted my money. I'll be like, great, you're clean, you're swept through, wonderful, how good is that? But then the other part is make sure you've got a 10-minute tummy gurgle somewhere in your life on a daily basis. You know, however you want to boost your immune system, this is a non-negotiable. But then, do you know what? It then translated back into my business. So one of my, I think all of our strengths are also our flaws. You know, my determination definitely meant that I pushed beyond the initial medical team, found a new team, learned more about the cancers, got myself screened, and had 2 preventative operations, and obviously this one recently, which meant that I stopped everything. So I'm clean. I feel so swept through. You know, I am so scanned. I know. But I have to tell you that 3 weeks ago, Jackie, going for a brain MRI to check out the spread to my brain was probably a very dark day. So I'm a member of the VNA, which has got fashion in it. So I was like, well, after the brain MRI, I'm going to have a very nice lunch at the VNA, you know, because what else are you going to do? You know, you've got this existential threat hanging over you. But the other thing I think people should look at as fast as they can is move away from the micromanagement, which kind of involves stress. So for me as an entrepreneur, I was technically very strong at detail and micromanagement, which is one of the main reasons we were so successful. You know, we did over 200 deals in 4.5 years. Well, you can't do that without, you know, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. But what that meant was huge amounts of extra, maybe stress, or just those huge amounts of extra work. And so I've really altered how I manage, because it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. So now it's more professional about, well, what's our deliverable? Where do we need to get to? How long am I going to give you to deliver on this? Before we make changes, whatever those implications of those changes are. So it's about taking a step back and saying, what's the goal and what's the outcome, rather than diving in and kind of pulling up the bootstrapping shoelaces.
And how's that letting go of the small details? Do you see that there's more like little balls dropped here and there that then you have to kind of deal with the emotion of that? Tell us about that.
Oh my goodness. It's interesting that because it's non-negotiable, you know, it's absolutely zero non-negotiable. And also I think it's going to be really useful for me in my life. It's so, you know, we plan, do, review as entrepreneurs, don't we? But actually as entrepreneurs, we plan and we do, and we very rarely review properly, because we like the game. We're back in the game. So I'm spending so much more time on reviewing, which is for people performance managing, for projects performance managing, and identifying in advance, what does the performance need to be, and what are the outcomes if it's a yes, and what are the outcomes if it's a no. So it's about kind of thinking it through in advance, so that it's less emotional when something does or doesn't go right. And so it's calmer. It's kind of, well, this is just a process, this is just a system, and the outcome needs to be this. And so we need to change the way of delivering if the outcome isn't this. Rather than, oh my God, they haven't done blah, I need to jump in at 10 o'clock at night and do their work for them, or whatever the heck it was. I used to regularly do 2 to 4 hours work a day of other people's work that I employed. How mad is
You're
that?
paying them for, but it's not perfect enough in how it's been done. And yeah, I think that everyone
Yes.
goes through that. I think it's this case of what got you to a certain point.
Yes.
All of us to that point was great. The hustle, the grind, the working too many hours because you're setting up something new. And then you get to a point that actually it's great. And then you have to completely change your way of being to be able to get to the next phase. And it's so hard.
Unless you've got a hard stop that basically says, if you don't, my honeybee, there's going to be an immune system. And then the other thing that happened, which was, I know this sounds very small, but I just was like, at 3 a.m. So I never once thought I will or won't die. It was like you're in front of a pathway and there's a tree and you can either go that way or that way. And you knew that pathway had 60% chance of living of the original cancer, 40% chance of dying of the original cancer. Then I had a few other ones thrown in as well. And it was, I'm not in charge of where that pathway diverges, but I'm in charge of the few meters between me and that diverging point. So I've got to make everything work in between me and that diverging point, please. And so it was just a real focus. So yeah, it became Project Cancer. But and I think my parents probably thought I was over killing it, but actually in the end it turned out I wasn't, because we discovered all these other ones, and I don't think they would have all been discovered if I hadn't gone, I need to get blah. And I did a lot, 6 weeks ago it was a 12 grand week, because they were like, this little lump in your lung that we've been monitoring has been growing, we need you to get a CT PET scan, we need you to get a brain scan. I was like, right, great, pay for it. It was a 12 grand week 6 weeks ago.
Do it.
Yeah, you
got
just
the ability to.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like this. I think the tree analogy is that's really amazing. Like what I get from that is it's like you basically created the part that you had power over, and you fully focused on that, and the bit that was out of your control, you leave it there, but you just grab the responsibility that you can grab and do everything that you can. I think that's there's definitely a visual there that can be used in many other places in life.
Yes, so you're boundaring it, but then you're also, that whole team, Susannah, that WhatsApp, you're also bringing in amazing people to help you. There's no way you can do this on your own, either knowledge or activity. And the other super important person to me was my dear friend Charlie, who's been a friend of mine for like 15, 20 years. He's a PT. He lost his mum to cancer when he was in his 20s. And I did say, would you be kind enough to work with me professionally, even though we've had this long friendship? And so twice a week, every single week, Charlie and I have done PT. And now for one of those, my other friend Sarah, that I've been friends with since we were 12, joined us. So in the when did I have lung surgery? On the Monday, and on the Thursday in the hospital, we were doing a PT session in the ward. It was so much fun. Mm-hmm.
It sounds like you basically allowed in a load of support. Like you invited everyone in. Like, was that a natural thing for you to do? I kind of feel like it probably wasn't, based on you being like the person who's running the business and you're in control and you're taking responsibility. That sounds like quite a big gear shift. Is that true? And if so, how was that?
Massive gear shift. So on the one hand, we put together that WhatsApp group on the way back from the hospital in complete shock. On the other hand, the first book I read, Kelly Turner, Radical Remission, one of the main things she said was social support. So it sounds odd, but it was like, you're given permission. You're given permission to ask for help. And also that cancer glasses, which remains with me now. Everything's very simple. It's either in or out, and there doesn't need to be any drama or difficulty if it's out. It's just done with kindness. And if it's in, it's loved, So I think before, I didn't really think about my social life enormously. I had lots of lovely friends who I definitely would tell you I loved, or family that I definitely tell you love. But they became, my house, I had vases of flowers for like a year and a half. There was never a day without a vase of flowers from friends and family for about a year and a half. It was like I had stand-in friends. I know if blokes are listening to this, be like, oh, for heaven's sake, Susannah, get to the prostate cancer. But it just meant that I had visual representations of people I love for so long. Right? Yeah. So it was you were given permission, because it was non-negotiable, because you might be on a terminal course, to ask for love and help from people you love. But I have to say, Jackie, the minute that the initial stuff was over, which was about 9 months in, it was so nice to be able to think about other people. it was like, oh, thank goodness. Because like, I wouldn't say it'd been boring because it was like a mission, but like, oh, how lovely to think about other, and my dear friend Layla, her daughter Margot was born during that really difficult time of not knowing whether this is terminal or not. And there was a very difficult birth. And it was just, so Margot and I have grown up together. She's almost 3 now.
Wow. Gosh, it's such a gift to, thank you for just being so open about how you're sharing this, because I just think it's such a gift for those of us to just reevaluate how we are living our lives and to be able to learn from you, which is just so amazing. What I want to know is, so you obviously you've had another scare a few weeks ago that you've had to go in, you had that terrible, a dark day in your words.
Yes.
How did you prepare for that? Like, with all these tools and techniques that you've learned, what did you do to give yourself the best day possible in those circumstances?
So the first thing was I had switched teams. I'd moved to the Royal Marsden, which is the 11th rated best cancer hospital in the world and the best in the UK. And so I'd moved from, I'm worried that this team, I mean, if I can go sideways, the other team, I'll give you 2 quotes just so you can see how poor it was. They kept, cancer can be smooth for some people, or it can be bumpy. For me, it was bumpy. And so they changed how they thought the diagnosis was. And one of my kidneys wasn't working properly, so they had to change the amount of chemo going in. So I had said to the doctor, I'd messaged the doctor, what stage am I at, and what do we do about the fact you've dropped my chemo by 60%? Where do I get my extra chemo? No reply. So I'd written letters to my oncologist, no reply. I'd phoned my nurses, no reply. And I'd written emails, no reply. Those are pretty basic questions. And then I'd met with that particular oncologist, no names, a month later. And her first statement to me was, you asked too many questions. So that was the quality of care. We'll just leave that there. So I had moved from, I don't trust you guys. I do not trust you. To I trust you. Because so number one was I'd moved to a team I totally trusted, highly competent, highly interested. When I asked this new doctor, who I've been working with for 2 years, Dr. Diana Tate at the Marsden, what would you do if this became terminal? She leant forward and she was like, we go after it. And you're like, yes, you're my guy.
The answer. You're on my team. You're hired.
You may not be successful, but we go after it. So I had the right team on board, just like an entrepreneur. And then I'd learned lots of techniques. So I pulled together all my friends. I mean, this all happened very, very fast. I went in to get the results of scans expecting to go home again. I was like, what? Oh my God, I'm staying in London. Okay. I called my big cousin, Bill, who's one of my dearest cousins, and went, Bill, can I come and stay with you, please? And so big cousin Bill, met me, hugged me, bought me a bunch of flowers. And the next day, I took a flower back in my buttonhole back into London, because he lives just on the outside of London. So I had Bill with me all day in the shape of a rose on a little paper clip on my lovely cashmere coat. And then breathing techniques, visualization techniques, and distraction. I've raised kids. So what do you do when they're having a little fit? You give them a saucepan and a wooden spoon. Yeah, you can't solve the problem, give them a saucepan and a wooden spoon. So after the brain MRI, and I'm chasing all sorts of different results, I'm straight off to the V&A to read a book on Christian Dior and have a very lovely lunch. It doesn't make it better, but what I'm trying to do is reduce the fear in my mind, and I'm trying to increase the white blood cells in the immune system. So my job is not to try and change the outcome. No, my job is 100% to change the outcome. But within my ability, my job is to try and boost my immune system and reduce my fear. So call on the people you love, do interesting things, distract yourself, breathe properly, visualize, and literally do not allow yourself to go past a certain stage in your mental thinking.
Wow. And really, like that love is, I don't know, love is the opposite of fear, right? And so for you, that by just surrounding yourself with those people, and Bill being there gives you a hug, and the V&A is a place that you clearly love, that's something that's important to you. You're just like, that's just making the fear just smaller and just making you feel safe.
Yeah, and kind of, you're kind of walking, and you're like in this world going, wow, I'm going through this and you guys are like having coffee. But so I'm a member of the V&A, so you push the button on the elevator and there's a little M. It's a bit like James Bond. You go up to the M floor and you're like, and it's a beautiful restaurant. You just think, okay, I can't change it. So I've got to have the time being good, Yeah. So love, Bill walked me to the station next morning at 6:30 in the morning. You can't think straight. He's like, get on that one, babe. Get you, babe. Get on that one, Suze. No, not this train. That's train, Suze. Puts me on the right train because you can't think straight. But I think it's never thinking the worst case and just saying, here's my responsibility. Here's your responsibility. How do I boost my immune system?
Amazing. And so now you're getting back to work again. Tell me, we're going to have another episode that we're going to come back to, which is more around the more practical sides of what the business changes have been. But from a kind of like a bigger picture perspective, you coming back to work again, what changes are you bringing through?
Well, I think some of them are in the zeitgeist anyway, and you're massively doing it. So the fact that we've got digital, so in a way, it was really lucky. I had recorded and put together all of my courses online before COVID hit. I'd had an online business for a while that was just sort of over there, and so for me, it's a real boost that other people can benefit from all the knowledge I had, but I don't need to be present because we've got great quality information for people that can really help change their lives. So that was great. So rather than teaching live, which I do enjoy enormously, I have the online business and I'm going to really focus on that. The second part is I have my property portfolio, which is beautifully built, beautifully managed by third-party amazing letting agents, all through automation and the letting agents. So that just ticks away beautifully in the background. Accountant, bookkeeper do a lot of the work. I do very little work on that, which is amazing. And so my focus, I'm kind of excited about this online business with great quality education. Can we bring that to more people? Can we do it digitally, but in a way that really works for me and really works for them? And the answer is yes, we can. So I'm kind of super excited about it. So I've just employed a team. In fact, a week before oh boy, we're going to go into the hospital in London, and everything is being done digitally and remotely now. So I'm now following your business model.
Well, I would never have thought when I'd see you in August doing these amazing things like 10 years ago, but that would be that's so cool.
I mean this nicely. I'm copying you. I'm like at your heels. One of the 6 buildings we sold was my office in Bristol, and I live half in Bristol and half in Barcelona, so I bought that apartment in Barcelona, so it's an amazing recuperation place and I don't have a mortgage on it. And my whole plan always in my life was Bristol, Barcelona, Brooklyn, and then Tuscany. I want to have a farm in Italy as well, so I still would love to do that. And my sister lives in Brooklyn, so we house swap. So I don't need to buy a £6 million house in Brooklyn, which I thought I was not going to have to buy, but as part of my plan, I was going to buy. So that's great. That's saved me £6 million. So just now the farm in Tuscany, and then that'd be a gorgeous life, won't it?
Amazing. And for the property portfolio to continue to tick away, are you going to do more property stuff, or you're just more all in on the online training side of things?
So this year and last year, I didn't do any property work at all for very obvious reasons. But what I did do was I was an angel investor. So I invested in projects where I've known the people for a very long time. So that brought in revenue, extra revenue, which was great. But also it allowed me to enjoy property while I was chilling out, listening to my tummy gurgling. Next year, I still intend in 2020, what are we, 23 just now, late 20, so 2024, just for safety, I'm not going to do any additional properties yet, but then I'll be buying in Barcelona. And the reason for that, my view, well, first off, I've already found discounted properties in Barcelona. I can't help myself. But also, it's a very strong market. It's a very international market. And unfortunately, Brexit has really not helped the UK economy. So I feel it's quite important to have 2 property portfolios. So it will be in Barcelona. But I'll start that in about 12 months' time, but not before. And then, of course, the online stuff. But I think you maybe heard me talk before. Property, I think there are 3 stages: the acquisition stage, the payoff stage, and then the buying with cash stage. So I have a property portfolio that could keep me for the rest of my life. It's gorgeous. And without worrying too much about medical bills or anything. And then I was full steam ahead for the payoff stage, and I paid off quite a few properties, and I'm still very interested in paying off properties. I know it's old school. I know other people don't agree with me, and that's fine, but I like to run my own show. And then the third stage is the acquisition stage with cash. So I'm still at that paying off houses, because I have houses with no mortgages, and I want more houses with no mortgages. And then the revenue you generate from property, you buy more properties without any lending. And this is from somebody that borrowed.
I can totally see that, Susannah. Like, I'm totally, we've been in that first phase of just like leverage. Yep. You can do so much more, and I can feel the seas of change in what we do, and I'm just like, God, yes, it's great, but it is a ball ache, and it's just like regulation in the UK and the banks, and they want to know your knicker size to give you a mortgage. Like, yes, do it, it's worth it, but it's a part of it I do not love. And so it's to get into that phase of then paying it down and just getting rid of a hassle. I can totally see why that's the choice that you've made.
And also with private investors, they're great, but it's nice to pay them off. It's really nice to pay them off and just go, thank you very much. That was amazing. You earned a lot of money, and the relationship was good. I don't need it anymore. But I think that's it. There are two types of investors, aren't there? There's the empire builders, and then there's the lifestyle. So a friend of mine, Ranjan Bhattacharya, at the beginning of COVID, we were having a chat, and he was like, Suze, with your ability to raise cash, mate, you should be getting into that city centre, because I live in the city centre, and you should be buying blocks of flats of 165, or you should be buying commercial buildings and turning them into 165 flats. And he's an empire builder, and I love watching Ranjan. He's an empire builder. We know this, and go the energy, but I'm lifestyle. So I'm very glad I wasn't in the middle of 165 flat conversion when all of this hit.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, wow, Susannah, this has just been so amazing. I just feel like I could talk to you all day on this topic, but I guess, is there one final thought that you want to leave people with on the looking after your health whilst building a property business to round off today's episode?
I think two. The first one is, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic state. If you don't know about it, and I did not learn about it, you can call it East and West. So Western medicine, cut, burn, slash, right? I'm a big fan. It saved my life. But Eastern medicine is preventative. So guys, why not prevent? So learn about the parasympathetic state, which is rest and digest, and make sure you've got 10 minutes plus of tummy gurgle a day. Tick. Even if you're doing 12 hours work a day or 14 hours work, you've got to allow your white blood cells and your immune system to gobble up any nasties. Okay, so it's a non-negotiable, however you do it, walking, meditation, whatever. And then the second one is probably from a slightly more Western point of view. And there's quite a great resistance to this, and I understand it. I probably would resist it if I hadn't experienced what I've experienced. And it's more about what I've seen in the waiting rooms. Because you talk to other patients, you talk to this beautiful girl from Kuwait with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old who's terminal at age 36 of breast cancer. That's a normal occurrence in my life now. My dear friend Sheila died. So because I've seen others who haven't made it through, can I ask people to proactively shake off our British reticence of not going to the doctor until it's too late, and actually say, I own the responsibility for MOTing my body. So our NHS system isn't set up for it. So guys, pull out your wallet, blow into it, pull out some cash, and just do all of the tests. Because if you catch anything small, no big deal. If you catch it big, like my friend Sheila, you're terminal. So 2, rest and digest, and preventatively scan, test, and eliminate before it ever becomes a problem. Please.
Wow. I mean, not really many words to describe that conversation. It's definitely put me on a search for how I can be more proactive with Western medicine. We are very much focused on proactive health using a lot of Eastern methodologies these days, but I've really reflected on this episode from Susannah how There's so much great stuff in the West that we have in terms of proactivity, but obviously you've got to have the funds to be able to invest into it. So we're looking about how we can be more proactive with health screening off the back of this. In the show notes, we will put some thoughts that Susannah's had about, from a health perspective, how to be more proactive. And these are the kind of ideas that we're working with as well for how we can be more on the front foot so we don't get nasty surprises, or at least we avoid them and catch them much sooner. If you want to connect with Susannah, check out The Good Property Company. Her website, YouTube, Instagram and Facebook links are all in the show notes. But Susannah Cole, The Good Property Company, if you want to connect with her. So wow, take heed of this now. I think it's something that's, if it's not front and centre in your mind to think about your health, it's very easy to wait until life makes you prioritise it. So use this moment as an opportunity to ask yourself what more you can do to look after your health, and let us all learn from the beautiful openness and honesty that Susannah has shared with us today. So have a great week ahead, and we'll see you this time next week on Friday for the next episode of the Property Lifestyle Mastery podcast.